Welcome to the third season of the award-winning series Above and Beyond. I'm Jordan Julian, and I'm an 11th grader at Rhinebeck High School. Above and Beyond is your opportunity to meet some of the upcoming young people in our community who will one day be leaders. Today's guests are Dina Doss and Sam Lawhon. Dina Doss is in the 9th grade and is also on the High Honor Roll. She's involved with track, cheerleading, student senate, academic challenge, key club, and mock trial. She moved to the United States in September of 2011, living it up in Jordan until then. Sam is a 10th grader, also on the High Honor Roll. He's involved with tennis, mock trial, and tools for change. He moved to the United States in the summer of 2012. Welcome, Dina and Sam. Dina and Sam are here representing Rhinebeck as international students. So I'll just begin by asking, where have you guys lived and what brought you to the United States?
Well, I was born in California, where my mom's brother lived, and then we moved to Jordan because most of my family was there, and I traveled to England during the summers and winters.
I spent the first 6 years of my life in California before moving to Switzerland because of my mom's work. Yet I would come back to the U.S. every summer, and I moved here last summer because of my dad's work.
And what do your parents do that require that you move?
My mom's a corporate lawyer, and my dad's a teacher, so we moved for his job.
So it seems like both of you guys have had quite a bit of experience with lots of different cultures and exposure to different customs. Of the different places that you've been, what culture do you guys associate yourselves the most with?
I personally associate myself with American culture, mostly because I grew up in an international society where American culture was prominent, and also because I feel like I fit in most with American culture because I can relate to it a lot.
I personally associate with American culture as well, yet I find that I can assimilate with a bunch of different cultures as a result of having gone to an international school.
Now, when you came to Westchester, did you know that this was the area that you would be living in, or had you a couple of different choices? What brought you to Westchester specifically?
Well, we were initially thinking about moving to New York City, but after looking into education and family life in Westchester, we found that it would be a much better fit, especially since the education was so great.
My dad took a job at the French American School of New York so that we could be closer to my family, who mostly live in Pennsylvania. And I actually toured Rhinebeck before coming, and I liked how it was a small school environment. It felt close to my old school, so that's how we decided on it.
So obviously Sam had visited Rhinebeck before coming here. Dina, what about you? Had you come to the school at all?
Well, my first time visiting the school was the first day I started, and it was 2 to 3 weeks into the school year, so no, I hadn't visited.
What were each of your guys' first impressions of the school when you first came?
I felt Rhinebeck was really welcoming and the people were really friendly, and it also had an air of really great diversity.
I also thought the people were quite friendly, and like I said, I liked how it seemed quite similar to my old school, that it was small and it had a community feel to it.
It seems as though going from Jordan or Switzerland to suburban New York must be a very drastic change. What sort of cultural differences that you noticed that maybe Americans wouldn't notice surprised you when you first came?
I wasn't really surprised by much, but my mother was really surprised by how friendly Americans are comparing to like more rigid, serious Jordanians that we had been around. Like if you had said hi to some random person on the street in Jordan, they would think you're insane, but here it's completely acceptable.
I found a lot of little things to be surprising. For example, in Switzerland, stores are closed on Sunday, and you can rarely find a store that's open for 24 hours. So a bunch of like small convenience things really surprised me.
When taking into consideration these little things, did you find that it made your adjustment into American lifestyle difficult?
I found it like pretty easy actually, because everyone was really welcoming, especially in such a close-knit community as Rhinebeck.
I found integration quite easy, and I also knew a little bit what to expect from coming here in the summers always.
Moving away from the smaller differences that you guys each mentioned, I can imagine that there's quite a bit of differences in child rearing as compared to Europe or Jordan and America. What do you have to say on that topic?
I felt that many of my friends in Jordan were brought up by nannies, and they weren't half as close as they are as children here are to their parents. And it was basically that they were like distant from their families, and nannies were just more commonly used to bring up children. I personally was brought up by my parents, but I barely know any of my parents' friends who did the same thing.
When I first moved to Switzerland, I spent a year in one of the local Swiss public schools. And I remember one memory that stuck out quite vividly to me is I walked out of the school and into the schoolyard, and there was one boy who was my neighbor who was being pushed and shoved by a bunch of kids, and I went home and I was very upset, and I told my parents about the whole experience, and they in turn told my neighbor's parents and explained what had happened and what I had saw, and we expected them to be, quite concerned, but they acted very nonchalant about the whole thing, expecting him to learn from it and to not make the same mistake again, to not, stand out again or whatever he was being pushed around for. So I find that in that environment, they expect kids to be a little bit more responsible. But at the international school I attended, I don't think there's much difference from there and here.
Did you find that these somewhat prominent child rearing differences was reflected in your peers in Jordan as compared to your peers in America or in Switzerland?
I definitely found that kids here treated their parents much more like friends than parents, whereas in Jordan, kids treated their parents like authority figures, and there was like a more formal air of relation.
I only attended the local school for my first year going there when I was quite young, so I don't really remember much of that. And as far as at the international school, I don't feel that there was a lot of difference between there and here.
This idea of independence or formality with regard to elders, how did this translate to each of your behavioral expectations in your old schools with regards to student and teacher relationships?
Well, at my old school, I felt like teachers were more of like authority figures as well. And relations with them were a lot more formal in that you would stand up when they walked in the classroom and you would have to raise your hand to ask a question. Whereas here, teachers are a lot more easygoing and they're really friendly and you can really connect with them on many levels.
I found that there's more academic independence here, and that teachers at my old school would chase you down for an assignment a little more, whereas here, students, would just be able to take the 0 if they didn't do it.
Did you guys find that you would apply what was deemed normal in your old schools when you first arrived in America, be it the formality that you encountered or the expectations of your teachers to chase you down for grades?
Well, I personally felt a lot more independence because I felt like my teachers wouldn't chase me down for grades here, whereas in Jordan they would. And also, like, for example, when writing an email, here I had to write it really like informally, whereas in Jordan I was expected to write it really formally, and it was really different.
I found that when I came here, I thought to myself, I really, need to be quite responsible and be on the ball because people wouldn't chase me down for it as much. But I could see how at the same time it could have gone the other way, and I could have become a little bit more relaxed in my efforts to get things done on time. So I think it really just depended on how I took responsibility.
It seems as if this sense of responsibility and etiquette that you guys both have applied to your American educational experiences would be quite beneficial to you. How did this impact the academic expectations in your old schools compared to Rhineck?
Academic expectations at my old school were slightly higher because there were no advanced classes, so everyone was crammed into one small class, and there was a bit more competition, I would say. And also the fact that your teacher would chase you down for homework and a paper really made it seem like if you didn't do it, it was a huge deal. Whereas here, like, you took responsibility for your missed assignments, and I felt like that was a very drastic change.
At my school as well, there were no advanced classes. So I found that some of the standard classes that everyone took were harder than some of the base level classes here. But at the same time, there's some advanced classes here that I found to be far more difficult than the standard classes that I was taking there.
Perhaps you can break down for our viewers the curriculum and testing systems that you guys encountered in your international schools.
Well, at my old school, I followed an MYP program, which is the middle years program, up until the 11th and 12th grade, which is when the IB program started. And in the MYP program, it's basically a trilingual integration, and you had to take English and Arabic in addition to either Spanish or French. And it was a really good program, but I felt it didn't give you as much freedom to choose classes as is given here, especially at Rhinebeck.
I also really enjoyed the fact that people had the freedom to sort of choose their own classes and figure out what they wanted to take and what they didn't.
How do you guys feel this concept of no advanced classes impacted the competition between students in Jordan and Switzerland as opposed to in America?
Well, I feel like in America, the competition in advanced classes is definitely higher than in Jordan, but overall, I'd probably say there's more competition in Jordan because there's only 25 students and there's more pressure on you to do better.
I find that there's a lot more academic competition here than there was in Switzerland, and I think that the advanced classes really create that environment a little more.
Right.
The fact that people can say they're taking an advanced class over just what everyone else is, I think that kind of breeds academic competition a little bit.
Do you think that the rigid behavioral and academic expectations that you faced in Jordan limited your self-expression?
I would probably say yes, they did, simply because my school wasn't very big on the arts, and also because I couldn't really choose what classes I was interested in taking, so I was stuck with whatever my school offered.
In regards to self-expression in America, through what forms have you as individuals taken to develop your own identities?
Well, I've really enjoyed Student Senate, which is a student-run program, and it's like governing your school in your own way. And I just feel like that's a really good way to express your personal self, because it's like I'm interested in law, so I can learn more about how to control people. And I just like the fact that not everything here is teacher-run.
I had taken MUN at my old school, Model United Nations, and I was able to apply some of that knowledge and experience to mock trial here. I was on the mock trial team, which I greatly enjoyed because it also gave me a little bit of an idea about the American legal system, which I didn't know very much about.
It seems as though the academic transitions for you went quite smoothly, as you guys have both obviously thrived in this new setting. In regards to social interactions, how did social norms in your respective countries differ from the social norms faced by teenagers in America?
Well, in Jordan, there was a huge difference in that it wasn't very socially acceptable for boys and girls to be friends, let alone date. So it's like, it was a bit of a culture shock seeing how acceptable it was beyond normal here. And just like the fact that two people of different genders couldn't be friends with each other in Jordan was kind of limiting. So it was nice to see that here it was much more accepted and not frowned upon by society.
Well, one thing that I've really noticed is that because it's a public school, people all live in a relatively similar area, small area. Whereas at my old school, people were very spread out, so people tended to congregate more in a town instead of going to people's houses as much.
Right. A very prevalent aspect of socialization between teenagers that gets a lot of focus from the media is the abuse of tobacco and alcohol. In what ways did policies and laws that may differ in your country as compared to America, how did they affect that facet of socialization?
In Jordan, I felt like since all adults smoke, it was more socially acceptable than it is here. So most children grew to start smoking. Whereas in the alcohol aspect, alcohol was banned because of Sharia law, which is Islamic law. And it was, I felt like that played a huge role because the only places that were allowed to serve alcohol to begin with were international bars. So that played a pretty big role.
I found that sort of alcohol consumption was a lot less demonized by the media in Switzerland, and the drinking age also was far different. It was 16 for fermented beverages and 18 for distilled. So it's quite a bit younger than the US, and I feel like there was also far less media attention played to it.
Dina, you mentioned Sharia law as being a very prominent feature of socialization for you. In what other ways did you find it impacted your life in Jordan?
Sharia law really restricted many things that women could do in the olden days. Like nowadays, people have a more modern approach, although it still like prohibits the like interactions between men and women unless they're married, which is kind of strange considering like in Jordan it would be okay for a brother to punish his sister for being seen with a guy, whereas here that would be like insane.
Did you find that Sharia law inhibited your ability to express yourself?
I really think it did, simply because I'm really interested in like different types of clothing. When I went to Jordan over the summer and I was wearing shorts, I was like given strange stares and people would come up to me and tell me that I was sinning. And it felt really strange considering I had lived in the US for the past year.
Another huge facet of socialization between teenagers is the prevalence of pop culture and media. At least in America, that's a very prominent feature. Did it play as big a role in socialization in Jordan and Switzerland?
Well, social media didn't play as big of a role as it does here. However, pop culture did, and it was mostly like American pop culture because people had American TV channels, listened to American music, and it was just really prevalent.
Living in Western Europe, there was obviously sort of Western European pop culture from, French or Swiss artists, but at the same time, I feel like American artists, music, all that stuff is really a global phenomenon at this point, and that, people all over the world and where I was listened to American music and knew, pop culture references and stuff like that.
It's interesting that Americanization seems to have taken hold of your experiences regardless of where in the world you are. Did you find that when you came to America, you were a bit out of the loop on the current trends, so to speak?
Well, I didn't feel out of the loop much, simply because the internet connects everyone together. So finding out about pop culture could easily be done by looking at a Yahoo news page or just like looking anywhere online.
I agree. I think that the internet really connects people as well. A couple references that will pass me by occasionally are sports references, given that American football and baseball are not popular sports in Switzerland, but I've made an effort to learn about them this year.
So, are there aspects of Jordan or Switzerland that you miss being in America for as long as you have?
Well, I definitely miss my friends and family that are there. But I also miss the feeling that some people were a bit more globally aware, simply because it was an international school with a bit more diversity and such.
I miss, of course, my friends and the whole community, but I really like how sort of small Switzerland was, which is strange, but you could take a train and be in France or Germany or Italy or any of these places, and it was just so close by. And of course there was a lot to do as well. You had the Alps really close, and I feel like everything was very close by and easy to get to.
It must be a very different experience to go from your respective countries to America. How did your expectations compare to what ended up playing out as reality?
Well, my expectations were pretty met.